catch up. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Natalie Orslane. I am an Assistant Director of Alumni Career Development here at UChicago. You are joining us today during a session of our Mind Your Career series, which is aimed at supporting you wherever and whenever you are on your career journey. It's pretty easy to get lost in the day-to-day madness of work, but taking a step back to look at your overall journey is really important. So we're really grateful that you're taking the time out of your day to join us. Today's webinar, Overcoming Imposter Syndrome, aims at tackling that voice in your head that asks you, am I actually good enough to be here? We are joined by Hallie Crawford, who's a certified career coach, speaker, author, and career expert. Her company, Create Your Career Path, I should say, is celebrating 20 years this year, which is pretty amazing. Hallie and her team are well known for their personal and outstanding support of their career coaching clients, and have helped over 2,000 people find jobs that make them excited to get out of bed in the morning, which if you are in a place that is as gray and cold as Chicago is today, it's a pretty big feat. I won't waste any more of our time. I'll hand it over to Hallie in just a second, but we will be taking questions throughout the session, so please make use of the Q&A and chat functions. Hallie, thank you for joining us today. Please take it away.
Thanks, Natalie. You ad-libbed a little bit, and I loved that. It makes me feel so good. Thrilled to be here with you all today. It is cold in Atlanta too, but I am not going to complain because I know that it is not nearly like it is in Chicago. I have a fondness for presenting this topic, but also presenting to UChicago alum. I lived in Chicago for 8 years and just absolutely love the city, and I'm thrilled to be here with you all today. And I feel like this topic is actually a pretty big deal because so many people changed jobs during the pandemic. And afterwards, I should, probably say even more so afterwards, right, with the Great Resignation and everything else. And I think, some people may have changed into something that they feel like, ooh, I'm in a little bit over my head, maybe. And also, if we're trying something new, or even if we've been in the same job for a really long time, imposter syndrome can really affect anyone. And that's why we're here to talk about it today, because even incredibly and the most successful people can sometimes have this negative self-talk. So you're not alone. And we're going to talk about a lot of different things today, tools to help you manage. So as Natalie said, I'm Hallie Crawford. I'm a certified career coach. We've been coaching and training for a really long time. And the advice that we're going to give you today is advice actually that we give directly to our clients as well. And there's a lot of really helpful resources on our website. So if you feel like you need additional support, obviously feel free to visit that when we're done. Let's talk about our agenda for today, so you kind of know where we're going and how we're going to handle things. So we'll talk first about, how we define imposter syndrome. What does it mean? I think most of us kind of have a sense of what it might mean, but kind of digging into this a little bit more can be really, really helpful. So at least like where we're coming from. The second thing we're going to talk about is there's two kind of types of impacts, if you will, from the imposter syndrome and that negative inner voice. There's the internal impact that we have where we don't feel as confident about ourselves. Maybe we've got the negative self-talk like Natalie was talking about, and all these different things that can happen to us. It could lead to higher stress too, and we'll discuss that more as we go. But there's also obviously the external impact. So what do we do or not do as professionals as a result of this? Do we not go for that next promotion where, it's past time? So we'll talk about those impacts, and we want to frame that out at the beginning so that you think about this as kind of two separate but interrelated things. We'll obviously discuss tools to manage this and work around it. We will talk about action steps at the end of our session today. And we will have time for Q&A at the end, but please feel free to put any questions as you think of them, either in the Q&A box or in the chat box, because I've got these pulled up over here on my second screen, which is why I'm looking back and forth a little bit. And if any of you have any good resources or tools that you have successfully used to help manage this, we would love to hear those as well. Just getting some great examples from people would be fantastic. If anyone, in addition to receiving a copy of the recording from today, which you will get, If you'd like a copy of our slides, we are happy to provide those to you. You can just email us at this email address. I'll share this again with you later so that you don't feel like you have to frantically write it down. And it's also at the bottom of all of our slides as well. So feel free to ask for that. So let's talk first about how we define imposter syndrome and kind of what we're talking about. So it's a psychological phenomenon, which maybe, sound a little too heavy, but it's, something that happens to us where people tend to have like a pattern, if you will, either over a period of time, or it could be a moment of time. It could happen off and on during the course of your career, depending on what's happening to you or what's going on. So for example, if you just got a new promotion, you might have a little bit more of this imposter syndrome versus if it's been like 5 years. So please know this isn't just a one and done thing, and it can kind of come and go throughout your life, or be something that like is stagnant and a constant thing, which obviously we really want to manage if that's the case. And bottom line, it's where we are unable to internalize our accomplishments as much as we should. We feel like we shouldn't be bragging about ourselves. We feel like we should be humble. And there's merit to those types of things, right? We're not going to be saying here today that walk around, being overly confident and arrogant. But the flip side of that is if your confidence is impacted, or you're not behaving as confidently like in front of a client or a customer or whatever it is, this is something that you need to be thinking about. Another kind of possible impact, if you will, and how we define it is people sometimes feeling like they're frauds or don't deserve the success that they've achieved. So it's if you have this voice inside your head every once in a while that's like, I don't really know what I'm doing. Do other people realize that? And then some people on the third bullet point here, so to speak, on this slide, is some people will just always like say, oh, my success was due to, I just got lucky, or I got a lucky break, my boss liked me or whatever, rather than I'm talented and I'm good at what I do. Okay, so this is how we're defining it. And there's other things that we might be saying to ourselves, of course, that relate to this. But this kind of gives you, some of the themes that we're talking about here. And it's a good idea as we're going today to start to write down some of these like trends that you might see for yourself, because the more you can define or identify what your patterns of negative thinking might be, the sooner you'll be able to start addressing them. And what we find is usually clients kind of have like one or two negative things that they say to each other. The good news is or to themselves, not to each other, sorry. The good news is that it's not usually like there's 20 different things that we're saying and we're like, oh my goodness, I have to deal with all of these 20 things. This is overwhelming. It's usually like a cassette tape. If you're my age, you know what that is, but it's like playing on repeat over and over, a couple of things that we always say to ourselves. And one of the things that we'll have some of our clients do, and then we'll move to this next slide, is have them start to write down like what are their negative thoughts, even like do a journal for the next like 3 to 5 business days, and write down, okay, when am I hearing these negative inner voices, so that you can start to see the pattern of what you're saying to yourself over time. And the deal with the imposter syndrome is that at least 2 out of 5 successful people consider themselves frauds at one time or another in their career, and 70% of all people feel like imposters at one time or another. And this is why we were talking about this a few minutes ago, that sometimes it's a continuous thing that's all the time for us, and sometimes it can come and go throughout the course of our career. It's pretty common across the board, male and female, and regardless of their age. It depends on circumstances, some of our past experiences as well. Like some of our clients have had really difficult situations in their past professional lives that kind of lead to this too. So all of this is stuff that you want to be thinking about and considering where it comes from, so you can help kind of manage it a little bit. Okay. And what we have found with COVID, kind of like as I alluded to before, that a lot of us, understandably, especially those people who feel like they don't work as well, let's say remotely, and we were forced to for several years, that could have led to a greater sense of imposter syndrome. So working from home, having to learn new processes or work processes and systems, And having to be, if you're a leader or a manager, having to start to lead virtually can be really intimidating in some ways too. So again, you're not alone. And there's a lot of reasons why this has become, I think, even more prevalent, as I was saying before. The other thing that can lead to this too is if we start to, work too much, and it's, easier, obviously, when we're working remotely in some cases to overwork, and we might feel a little bit more burned out, that can take a hit on our confidence too, just because we're tired and we don't have that, re-energizing time. Okay. So the other thing that we wanted to share with you too, and then we'll start to talk about the internal and external impacts. And I see there's a question. I'll get to that right after this slide. Thanks for asking. Is that it really can affect anyone. I think some of us feel like, okay, really successful entrepreneurs or like bigwigs or whatever that just seem so confident, they never have this problem. And what I try to remind our clients is that everyone has challenges and obstacles, even incredibly successful people. It's not like they didn't have any and they just sailed through life. It's that they learned how to work around them. So when you hear from like sports figures who are successful, etc., anyone talking about inspirational stuff, they will say, I had challenges. It's just, I figured out how to get around them. And this is just an example. This was from Inc. magazine a few years ago from a really successful entrepreneur in California who, when he was interviewed, said, I didn't feel like I deserved the success that I had. Their business was great and all of that, but he wasn't really able to take as much ownership of it, saying, well, maybe it was just luck of the location and our staff was great. Now, we always want you, obviously, as any type of leader within an organization and as a professional, you want to give credit to other people as well. That's not what we're saying. You also want to. It's an and situation where you also want to be able to take ownership for yourself. So the question we had here is considering myself unsuited for a more challenging or senior position also a case of imposter syndrome? This is a really great question, right? Because this is kind of one of those things where it's like, how do we really know? And what I would answer to this is, if your experience and expert, like number one, I would say, how do you feel? Like, are you just doubting yourself? Because, for example, if you look at your resume and your past history, your experience, and you look at what your bosses have said about you and your clients and customers have said, are you possibly qualified for this? You're just kind of talking yourself down. So there's a tangible aspect to this too. For example, if a more challenging position, if you look at the job description and it says it requires like 5 years of leadership experience and you only have 2, okay, well, yeah, you might not be quite suited for it yet, but don't let that hold you back. Figure out, okay, how can I get that, leadership expertise and experience? So the short answer is yes, it could be. You need to separate what is internal and like your negative self-talk versus what is reality out there. And you can make a list of, okay, here's what's reality based on my comparison, and here's the negative self-talk, so you push that away. It's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. I love it. All right, let's take a look at our next slide here. And actually, we want to start with, we've got 2 polls for today, and this will be our first one. So the internal impact, we started to talk about that a little bit, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. Let's go ahead and launch this poll if we could. And while we're doing this, these are some examples on the slide of some of those feelings you might be having that are negative, or some of those thoughts you might be having that are negative. So there's feelings that are the internal impact, and there's this negative self-talk that we might be hearing in our head. And I know that might sound weird, but we all know we talk to ourselves. I start to do it now out loud in the grocery store, which is a whole separate issue. But sometimes my son gives me a hard time. It makes me feel like I'm old. And please note too, as you're filling this out, which is great, there may be other ones for you. And so part of what we want you to be thinking about today is, like I said, you could do, like a quick journal exercise of the next few days of, what are the things that I'm saying to myself? Because it could be some of these, it could be something else. And you also want to note too, when this happens more often, because it could be that, for example, there's a certain customer that you work with, or a certain coworker or whatever, that tends to bring this up in you, and kind of analyzing that a little bit more to figure out what that's about can be really, really helpful. So identifying themes and situations where it ebbs and flows can be a really helpful exercise too. Okay, so we've got a good number who have participated. Thank you all for that, appreciate it. And we've got discounting success. They're all pretty close, but the discounting success is the most common. Makes perfect sense. And we'll give you some examples as we go today too. Feeling like a fake is the 47%, and 32% is attributing success to luck. Okay, got it. Thank you for sharing this, everyone. Start to write down and think about the different things that you're experiencing. And remember, normally people have 2 or 3 of these things. They're not going to have 10 of them, and that makes it a little bit easier to manage. When we first, I always like to share this, because when we first start with a coaching client, one of the things we ask them are, what are their greatest obstacles? And it's very interesting, because 9 times out of 10, when we're talking with a new client and starting to get into the coaching with them, they tell us point blank, we don't even point this out to them or don't even ask the question directly this way necessarily, but they tell us that they are their biggest obstacle to their success. So for example, going back to our question here that we had, is like, there's a difference too between saying, okay, well, I'm not quite experienced, and then feeling like, okay, well, so I'm not ready, and then just not doing anything about it, versus saying, okay, I'm not quite as experienced as I could be, but what am I going to go do about it? It's your mental perspective and your attitude to take charge and handle it, okay? And this is where we get to the results, the external impact, if you will. So what happens to our clients, we find, is they do things like not applying for a promotion or a new job because they're scared. They feel like they're not totally qualified, so they're just not going to do it. They might understate their experiences or their experience or their skills, like in interviews or even in just meetings with colleagues or coworkers. And some people will tell us too that they will over prepare for tasks as a result of feeling like they're not qualified. And this is an interesting one. All of these can result in feeling more stressed. But if you're the type of person that, for example, you feel like you're a perfectionist, and part of it is because you feel like you don't know what you're doing, that can be an imposter syndrome issue as well. We had one client that came to us and said, you know what, I haven't gotten a promotion in 10 years, and I just never asked. I didn't do anything about it. And this, again, is where we want you to be proactive. So in addition to thinking about the internal results or impact, if you will, as we were talking about a moment ago, it's a really good idea to write down and think about, okay, what are 2 of the biggest negative impacts that I have had in my career history so far? Did I not press for, greater challenges and bigger projects so that I could move forward in our career? I think especially before COVID, and just depending on how the economy is doing, we all tend to get complacent about our careers. It's like, it's our job. We just assume the paycheck's going to come in. I mean, it just happens. But also we get busy and we're focused on the task at hand. So we need to also think about, okay, where am I kind of playing small in my career or hiding out a little bit where I could push it more, and I need to ask for that next promotion or, go for it instead of just being afraid to do so. Let's do our second poll here if we could. We're really curious too how many people feel like an imposter, kind of what percentage of the time. Is it a lot of the time? Is it 50%? Is it 25%? And honestly, I will tell you that for me, it's probably about between 25 and like 40% of the time. It depends on the day and, what's going on if I'm trying something new. But there are times that for me, even though I have a business that I absolutely love and it's been, over 20 years, there are times when I'm like, what do I really know what I'm doing? Like, I don't feel like I'm going to be 50 next year. I feel like 25 sometimes, and am I just making something up? And so sometimes too, when we're more senior in our career, we start to feel like, it's like, well, isn't everyone good at this same thing? And actually, this isn't just about people who are more senior in their career. We tend to assume that if we're really good at something, because it comes so naturally to us, that it comes naturally to everyone else. And that's what you also need to be really careful about too, is not just assuming because you're such a whiz at spreadsheets or whatever it is, well, can't you do this? Remind yourself that no, this is, a strength and a skill that you have. And the way that you approach those things is unique compared to everyone else as well. All right, so we've got about 50% of the time so far, which is good. I'm glad that it's not 75% because that would be, that's a lot if that's the case. Please know if for the people who are writing down the 75%, I think it's a really good idea for you because you might feel this way. It might seem like it's more frequent than it actually is. But if you can write down, okay, where are the times during the day and who I'm interacting with, etc., that I feel this more often, you will be able to parse it out a little bit more. And the other good news about this too is when we start to talk about our tools to manage is small changes in what you do, and just some of these small kind of easy exercises can actually have a really big impact and a huge result. So it's not like you have to, turn your brain inside out again just to fix this. So that's the good news too. All right, cool. So we've got the majority is 50% of the time, which we said, and then we've got 25% and 12%. Thanks for that. I really do think that for everybody, writing down kind of the themes, even if it's just for like 48 hours, can be incredibly helpful. What we have found with our clients is when they do a quick, and what we call it is gremlin taming journal. There's a really good book, and I'm going to put it in the chat box right now, called Taming Your Gremlin, that we recommend to our clients. And I think it's Rick Carson. Let me just spell this right here. We use the term gremlins with our clients. Those are our negative inner voices. And what they'll start to realize is they might have like 2 or 3 gremlins in their head that are saying the same thing over and over, and they're playing into themselves. And so what makes it a little bit easier there is you can start to kind of objectify and step outside those negative inner voices, so you can start to manage them a little bit better and be a little bit more proactive. We had another question that I wanted to say too. Oh, and also a share, which was great. I feel like much of my stagnation is the over preparation related to perfectionism. Absolutely. It took me 2 months to write a draft of a statement for promotion and really brought out the imposter syndrome in me. Totally understand. Thank you for sharing that. The perfectionism can be a good thing, but it can be a double-edged sword. So you want to kind of say to yourself, for example, let me use the perfectionism to my advantage when it's appropriate to do so. But then I'm going to say, for example, I'm going to give myself a deadline. I'm going to work on this for a total of 2 hours over the next, couple of weeks. And you set a timer for yourself, and that's it. So you want to be careful of kind of going down that rabbit hole, like you're saying. One of the questions we had is, how do you get over preparing? It feels like a circular issue. I over prepare to feel less like an imposter, but it makes me really stressed. So similar to what we were just talking about with the perfectionism. Again, I think what you need to start to say to yourself is kind of pull that perfectionism outside of you and say, okay, how can I use this effectively? I need to be detail oriented about this project. And that means I need to take a little bit of extra time on these areas, for example. But then I'm going to give myself a time frame that I'm allowed to work on this, and that's it. Set a timer for yourself, like on your phone, and say, this is the amount of time I'm allowed to work on it, and I'm done then. If you want someone else to do a quick review of it for you before you turn it in, for example, you could have a friend, a family member, or a coworker to give you that extra validation of, no, this is okay, it's good. But the more you can say to yourself, like, okay, like my perfectionism may come into play here, so let me use it to my advantage, but then I'm going to tell it to be quiet and go and, play outside or whatever, like the gremlin kind of concept that we're talking about, the better off you're going to be. So be more objective and thoughtful about how you're approaching your tasks versus just diving into them and going down that rabbit hole. If you feel like you need a little bit more help with this and anything else we're talking about, we always want to offer a strategy session to people who attend or listen in. We'll give you some advice, and it's a chance to learn a little bit more about coaching too and how we can help you with all this stuff. Let's talk a little bit more about tools to manage, because this is the big one, right? So a couple of quick examples and some tools that we'll start with here. So a lot of times with the imposter syndrome, improving someone's confidence can help them. for obvious reasons. So using one of our clients, Beth, she worked with us a few years ago, and she's just a really good example because she literally had a lot of imposter syndrome. She constantly credited her success. She was very high up, actually at the time at Home Depot in marketing. But there were two things for her. One, she didn't have a college degree, and that was always like a thorn in her side, something that made her feel less confident. And she would always say, well, I had this boss at one point who, you know, just loved me and I just got really lucky because he promoted me and believed in me. So there was nothing in there about her saying how, you know, this is what she was good at. And some of the things that we used with Beth were listed on this slide. So one thing that you could do is to interview other people about how they see you. How do you come across? What do they see are some of your strengths? And also, are there times, and this would be someone obviously that you would really trust, are there times when you're not coming across as confidently? And what are the things that you're doing that they can tell? Is it your tone of voice? Is it the way that you're sitting? Is it that you're just not talking as much? To find out what some of those patterns might be, interviewing other people that know you really, really well can give you some of that insight. And even if there are some new coworkers or maybe a new boss or someone new that is just getting to know you, in some cases, if you're comfortable doing so, you could interview them as well. A second thing that you can do is to write up some affirmations. So for those of you who are struggling with that perfectionism, if there's something that you can say to yourself and put like a Post-it note on the wall of your office or your screen or whatever of like, you know, manage perfectionism, or I know what I'm doing, something short and sweet. Whenever you have an affirmation or write one, you want to make sure that it's something that you believe, that really kind of speaks to your heart and to that negative inner voice and squashes it or soothes it a little bit, so to speak, makes it shut up. But that it's short and punchy. It can't be that long, but it's something that you want to start saying over and over to yourself regularly, because you need to program or reprogram what you're saying to yourself in your head. So this is where, again, if you start to write down some of the negative things you say to yourself and start to write down what the opposite of those things are, those could be some of your possible affirmations. And affirmations are best worked on, so to speak, said out loud or inside of your head if possible. Two things, which I know may sound weird, you can do some of them at home, but in the morning, in the afternoon, and at night, ideally. It doesn't have to be for 30 minutes. You can say them a couple times. And studies actually have shown that if you say your affirmations in front of a mirror and you're looking yourself in the eye, it has a stronger impact. I know it may sound crazy, but psychological studies have shown that it does improve things that way. Another thing that we had our client Beth do was to write down all of her accomplishments since childhood. Work ones, but also personal ones too. And there was something really cool for her about saying, wait a minute, look at all the stuff I've accomplished, even if it's not just work stuff. And that helped her feel a lot more confident as well. And two other things to think about, and please share in the chat or the Q&A if you've got some other ideas, we'd love to hear it. Taking small risks every day, trying something new, putting yourself out there a little bit more in ways and places that it's okay for you to do so is a really good way to build your confidence muscle. And we talk about confidence as a muscle because it's like a muscle that you have to work out consistently and develop. It's like you have to go to the gym and, you know, work out your muscles or else they're going to atrophy. It's the same thing. And so, for example, if you tend to be more introverted, I'm actually more introverted than extroverted. So I sometimes have to push myself to speak up in a meeting or whatever it is. If you push yourself and say, for example, in the next couple of weeks or in the next week, I'm going to speak up at least once in every single one of my meetings, that is a small risk that you can take every single day or, you know, a couple of times, whatever it is. The point is, the more you put yourself out there and it goes successfully and everything's fine, the more able you will be to do so going forward and to take the risks that you need to take to ask for the promotion, tell that perfectionist to go away because you need to work on something else, etc. So small risks on a regular basis and challenging ourselves definitely helps improve confidence. And one of the other things, and I see we've got a question here too, which I'll answer, is our physical body posture, like at work, if we're starting to feel like a little less confident and the imposter syndrome is creeping in, pay attention to how you're sitting. Are you kind of slumped over and kind of just getting like that? Sit up, stand up, and walk around for a moment. Physical motion, even if you just get up from your desk at work and walk to the bathroom for a minute and come back, or go get a drink of water or whatever it is, say your affirmation to yourself and go sit back down. But physical movement as part of or supporting what we're trying to do internally here with this can make a huge difference. We have had clients where we'll tell them, look, how are you sitting or standing right now? And they're like, I'm just kind of, casual or whatever. And we're like, well, sit in a posture that feels more confident to you. And in that moment, when they do that, they actually feel a little bit more confident. So you can control this. You've just got to be more mindful of it and proactive. So the question we had come through, I am unemployed and searching for a job. How can I use these suggestions to stay focused and positive at this time? This is such a good question because job searching is no one's favorite thing. In 22 years, I don't think I've had anyone ever say, I love job searching. And also it can be really stressful because there's going to be plenty of rejection. So I would employ the things here, if I were you, keeping in mind for everyone on the call too, that some of these are going to have a greater impact on you than others. So try them all and then latch on to whichever one seems to improve your confidence the most. But when you're in job search mode, especially, like making sure that you review and are like, keep your resume like out on your desk so that you're really conscious of, what have been your accomplishments and your successes. Some people will create like a playlist where in the morning they've got a few songs that really pump them up, and that's something they can do and play or listen to throughout the day. Taking walks and exercising, getting a buddy who's willing and able to talk with you if you need a little pep talk during the course of your job search, like every single day, like an accountability partner. Those are some things you can do too. Don't try to do all of this alone. That's why we're here as coaches, because it is hard and we get in our own head and in our own way sometimes. So I would try to use all of these, but kind of, the ones that I mentioned too, and see which ones work best for you. This is why networking events for job seekers can be incredibly helpful. But what I would also do when you're networking too, by the way, is don't just attend job fairs or networking events where people are unemployed, because sometimes that can be a little like, oh gosh, depressing in some ways, depending on how they set up, etc. But networking with people who are also employed as well can be really helpful because they're going to have a different energy and kind of a different vibe. It is a really good idea, and this piggybacks on what we said. Even if it's like a friend, it doesn't have to be a mentor or someone formally, but find a way to have someone to connect with on a regular basis about your job search, about what you're trying to do in your career for those next steps. So you want to have a plan, which we're going to talk about in a moment, but it's also a really good idea to have regular check-ins with whomever is your mentor or someone who can help you on this journey of overcoming the imposter syndrome a little bit more. You can ask them for feedback and be open to it, obviously. But even more so, if you've got regular meetings with them and kind of check-ins with someone about how is this perfectionism thing going? Like for the next month, it takes 90 days in some cases to develop a new habit. So you've got to work on this consistently. And it's a really good idea to have someone else who you're going on the journey with, who's either really good at this stuff already or is working on it with you and struggling with it too, so that you don't feel like you're alone and you guys are working on it together and coming up with different ideas. One of the other things that we wanted to put out there to help kind of boost your confidence is to get really clear about what your leadership strengths are and just your strengths in general. So there's a leadership wheel here, and then we'll show you a way to start helping identify some of your strengths too. But some of our clients will tell us when we talk about, okay, well, what are your top 5 strengths? They're like, I'm not really sure, or I'm not sure how to articulate them as well as I would like. This leadership wheel can help you identify, as one example, what some of your strengths are as a leader, managing change, building consensus, etc. A lot of times for people, it's helpful to have some examples that they can pick from. So you could use this wheel and do a quick self-assessment. How good are you at any of these different areas? This is from Development Dimensions International. It's a management consulting firm. And these are some of the top 10 leadership skills they assert are important in today's economy, okay? But if you do some like self-assessments like this, or even ask other people to assess you as well, someone like a coworker, your boss, someone that you trust, this can help boost your confidence too, because you're getting clear on not just what your strengths are, but how you can articulate them. Because that's part of the problem too that people will have, is they might know that, okay, well, I'm good at building relationships, but is that really a strength? Yes, it is. And how do I articulate that a little bit better? These examples can help you with that. I'm going to also put in the chat box too, the strengths assessment that we like. And the university, I know, Natalie, you might have some that you all offer too through your office, so you could share those as well if appropriate. The Strengths Finder is good, but go to your alumni services too, because there's a wealth of information and resources there too. And sometimes taking one of those assessments can be incredibly helpful. One of the ways that you can recognize and understand what your strengths are too, this is from the Gallup organization. They're the ones that own the Strengths Finder assessment. When are the times, like think about this, when you feel really effective and when you have been successful in your career so far? When have you gotten kudos in one of your evaluation meetings? I'm losing what the name of that is. But in one of your, annual reviews, that's what it is, in your annual review, where do you get the most kudos? What are the activities or tasks or projects that you actively look forward to? Those are signs of a possible strength. When you feel inquisitive and focused and challenged, like in the flow, you could be using a strength during that time. And when you really feel like you're being yourself, fulfilled and authentic, and after you've completed like a task or a project, again, that's another sign that you're leveraging a strength. So being tapped into or clued into and being able to articulate your strengths more can really help you overcome your imposter syndrome. And another kind of tool or resource that you can think about too is to say, okay, we talked about strengths already, but what's my past education? Like, what does that bring to the table for me? You have this amazing degree, like lean into that. I mean, honestly, I feel like the degree that I have from Vanderbilt, like that gives me confidence. And so whatever your major was or anything like that, lean into your education and the classes that you've taken either during college and after college. Think about your past experience. How many years of experience have you had in one specific industry? Or even if it's not that long, what kind of unique combination of strengths and experiences do you have that may be different from anyone else? And the other thing we really want you to think about too is, how did your personality type play into what your strengths are? Are you more extroverted, for example, and so you're really good at building rapport and relationships with people very, very quickly? I'm going to move over because the sun is shifting here in my office. Think about those things that are related to your personality type and what you're good at as well. And that will help boost your confidence and move this imposter syndrome aside a little bit more. I want to move to the next slide here, and then I want to share with you kind of the result of what happened with our client Beth that we were talking about before. So we also had her keep on her computer, like on her desktop where it was easily accessible. You could also use it, on like handwritten as a journal or whatever too. But an accomplishments document. So outside of your resume, one of the other things you can start to track for yourself are, what are the things that I accomplished today? And it could be daily, it could be weekly, whatever is most appropriate for you. But start to keep like testimonials that you get, like an email from a client or a customer, or from a coworker or a boss. Thank you so much for this help. You were really blah, 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 whatever is going on there. Keep this document because it's something that you may not add this type of content necessarily to your resume. It can be an enhancement for it when it does come time to ask for a promotion or go get a new job. But if you read this accomplishments document, and even like the 3 to 5 things that you accomplished in every given day or in any given day, that can help you boost your confidence as well and start to understand and see what the common thread is of your strengths and experience, what you bring to the table. And then finally, and we'll start to move to Q&A here too, is we want you to create a plan. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, where we don't want you to just leave the webinar today and say, okay, yeah, I got to work on this. And then your phone rings and then you have to go talk to someone and then we forget all about this, which has happened to me before too. So a good idea is to think about, okay, what are the things that we've talked about today so far that resonate the most with you? For example, I really need to find an accountability partner because I feel kind of alone in all of this, or I feel kind of alone in my organization, or I'm working remotely and it makes me feel that way. So is there someone that's even just a friend that I could talk to a little bit more frequently to help get that boost? And we could do a coffee break, every other day or whatever it is. If you feel like you are not as strong or not as confident in your leadership strengths, identify those ones that you need to improve and create a plan for working on those. So instead of feeling fearful and frustrated, getting into action and saying, what am I going to do about this? That can help you enormously too. Include in your plan any classes or training that you feel like you might need. If you want to pick up the Taming Your Gremlin book, that's a fantastic, really quick, easy read. That could be a class or, a book that you're going to read to help you with this process. And give yourself some 30, 60, 90-day goals and say, okay, by, in the next 30 days, I really am going to work more on speaking up a little bit more in meetings, or I'm going to work on my document where I'm going to ask for a promotion in the next 90 days. So come up with a plan of action, and milestones that you want to see for yourself. It needs to be beyond the 90-day. Like we said, the confidence muscle needs to be worked out. But at least you've got a plan short term for overcoming this. And then finally, if it's appropriate to do so, you can share it with your manager or a friend or a family member, whatever it is. Again, this is part of the accountability partner piece. And keep in mind too, before we get to Q&A, and actually let me just go ahead and flip over to that. The goal here is not to get rid of your negative inner voices completely, just because being realistic about things, they're never going to be totally quiet. We all have them. They'll probably change over time. It's a question of just getting better at managing them more effectively, right? So as we said earlier, even really successful people, they're going to have this. And I don't believe that anyone doesn't have them at all. We've had a few clients tell us that they don't have any negative inner voices. And I didn't tell them this, but I didn't necessarily completely believe them. It will get better over time, but just don't put the perfectionism onto the gremlin taming either, to say, well, I have to be perfect about this and, I'm terrible or whatever it is if I can't overcome them. It's going to be a lifelong thing. The key is to just manage them a little bit better. So here on the slide, if you could get out your pen and paper as we start to move toward, if there's any other questions, and also I see there's some comments in here too, which is great. Create an accomplishments document. We love this one because it is something like the act of writing things down, I think really helps kind of solidify it in your brain, if you will, and find a mentor, a coach. And what I should say here too is just someone, a partner in this process that can help you, kind of get over these negative inner voices as well. The client Beth that we talked about, so I did want to close that story out too, and feel free to write anything in the chat or the Q&A box. She got over her imposter syndrome and actually got a huge job. It was up in Chicago. Which is just a funny coincidence. And it was such a huge promotion for her and such a wonderful opportunity that she moved her whole family, kids, everything up there for that position. And I was just so incredibly thrilled with her, because at the end of the day, it wasn't that she suddenly had to go get this brand new certification or, go back and get a master's degree or anything like that. She was getting in her own way at the end of the day. So that's kind of a closing thought that I want you all to keep in mind. All right. I'm going to read some of these comments and go through some of the questions. I love this. Thank you all for sharing. Sometimes, yeah, imposter syndrome can be a response to workplace trauma. Totally hear that. We have had a lot of clients come to us who have had an abusive boss, and it's ranged from really bad, like HR kind of need to bring them in and the person needs to be fired, to just even subtle comments that I think can be just as bad in a lot of ways. So keep in mind, and so thank you for sharing this, that you may feel like you've overcome those because you're in a new job or whatever it is, but the psychological kind of damage that can happen there, even at your new position, you want to just keep in mind if you're remembering those experiences or if you're hiding out still because of that. Just be mindful of it, because it is something that can be overcome, but you just want to be mindful of it and continue to work on that, because it can creep in every once in a while when you don't even realize it. Thank you for sharing that, because it's absolutely true, especially from difficult bosses. Another person shared writing down in your journal the things that you accomplished during the day at the end of the day. Absolutely. That's part of what we were talking about there. And really good point here with that one. It doesn't matter if it's a huge accomplishment. What matters is that you're noticing things and you're training your brain to focus more on those things, the positives versus like the negatives or the negative inner voices. So absolutely, it doesn't have to always be this big, huge win. Just writing down any small accomplishment, like I approached this task in a better way today, to one of your accomplishments could be I beat the perfectionism, negative inner voice. That would be huge for you. Another person is saying fully agree. On the opposite side, self-confidence can be the result of an inspiring and empowering boss. And if you are in a toxic situation, we definitely want you to try to, if you can, figure out how you can move out of that, because it can be incredibly damaging. And on the flip side, we can feel great when we're with inspiring great leaders. Tracking your accomplishments, absolutely. It helps you prepare for your annual performance review. And those are things that, you can share in writing or just verbally as well. So that's perfect. And similar to an accomplishments document, another person is sharing, when I get a positive feedback email, I move it to a props folder. Oh, I love the props folder. I've never heard that. I think that's fantastic. So you're saving those things. It's good for all of these different reasons. That's fantastic. A props file. You know what? I'm going to write that down, and I hope it's okay if I steal it from you all, because we need to put that in here. Folder, email. Fantastic. Few questions we got before the event. How long will it take for me to see an improvement? It could be really, really quickly. It depends on, I think, how long this you've been struggling with this particular negative inner voice and how much of a habit you've gotten into in this negative way, so to speak. So I would give yourself at least like 30 days. I would say 2 weeks to start seeing like some improvement, but 30 days to see a bigger improvement. That would be like a general estimate. And then it can just, go from there too. Is it a fast process or one that will take some time? As part of that, be patient with yourself. So I say a couple of weeks, you should start to feel a little bit better and get better, let's say, about maybe noticing those negative inner voices in the next few weeks. And that in and of itself can help you start to feel better. Getting to be an expert at taming your gremlin, that could probably take like 90 days for sure. And then another one might pop up. So be patient with yourself, because it does take some time and being thoughtful and mindful. I talked about finding mentors. How does one go about that? Approach someone about being your mentor. Okay, good. Let me know, Natalie, if there's any other ones I missed besides that. Yeah, so mentors are also not something that you're going to find overnight. And not every single person has one. When we first work with clients, I would say about 50% of the people have one and 50% don't. It's not something that you just walk up to someone and say, will you be my mentor? And that's it. It can take a little bit of time, so be patient with yourself. But it could be someone either within or outside of your organization that you've networked with in the past and maybe has taken an interest in your career path. And if you don't have anyone like that, it's a good idea to start like thinking about that. Like, could my boss, my current boss, for example, if they're very inspiring, and you really like working with them, etc., you could ask them if they or someone else they know would be willing to kind of serve as a mentor. Some bosses are willing to do that. Like they like a mentorship role as part of being a manager or supervisor. You can ask your organization if they have a mentor program. You could try to network with people within your industry specific association to see if there's anyone who's maybe just a little bit older or more experienced than you that you start to network with that might be willing to do that. So think of it as like an organic process that if you really connect with someone either inside and or outside of your organization, or even a previous coworker or something that could be like a mentor to you, you can just ask them like, hey, would you mind if we had or set up, even if it's an informal kind of mentoring relationship, I would love to take you to lunch once a quarter or have a virtual meeting with you just to be able to pick your brain and share ideas a little bit more. Something like that, kind of a soft ask would be fine. The University of Chicago might have some of these types of either programs or offerings. And if not, if there isn't something that's quite as formal, this is a really great place or way to leverage your alumni association network and their LinkedIn group, because there might be people there that you'd like to approach as a possible mentor too. Oh, good. And someone else shared a cool journal for daily affirmations and accomplishments. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that too.
We
so
also had another one come in. Just a question was about sort of how do you navigate if you're realizing maybe some of your imposter syndrome is coming from more external factors. So say you're realizing, you know, this job isn't right for me. The reason why I feel like an imposter is because I'm not in the right position. Maybe I have, you know, a bad boss or a bad team. How do you navigate feeling if that's the case and you have to make a change, or if it's more you're putting those own feelings upon yourself?
Ooh, that's a really good one. I don't think that there are many people out there that would be putting those bad feelings on themselves that much, meaning my guess would be that there's probably something going on there. If there's a way that you can kind of figure out if other people feel that way within your team, that can give you some kind of objective feedback about what's going on. There's a chance that you could go talk to HR to find out if they'll keep things confidential, to talk about what's going on there, to find out a little bit more. But I would work on your imposter syndrome things for sure, but I would try to see if you see some patterns and themes for other people within your team as well, because my guess would be there is probably something that's not ideal going on there. And in an ideal world, if you can try to speak to your boss about it, I know that the boss may be part of the problem. So again, that's where you may speak with HR instead. But if it's possible to do that, to see what's going on a little bit more, that could help.
Amazing. Yeah, and if anyone has any last minute questions, we have a few more minutes here. But I think probably covered a bunch. Well, we do have an alumni networking site, Wiser. I will make sure to send that link out in the follow-up email with the recording as well. It's a great service to connect with your fellow alumni. It actually has a really awesome feature that you can search alumni who are willing to be mentors and who are in your area or in your industry, and find people that you may want to be able to connect with and set up a call or an email right in Wiser. So it's a really great tool, and we recommend that you take a look at it if you are interested in more networking opportunities. Yeah, thank you all for being here today. Hallie, I noticed through the admin, her create your career path admin email in the chat. So please take advantage of that if you would like the slides, if you want to set up that really awesome complimentary strategy session and learn a little bit more about the work that Hallie's team does.
Thanks. Cool.
Yeah, and thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Hallie. We really appreciate it. I feel like I have learned a lot. If you're interested in more Chicago Careers Programs events, I'm also going to throw another link in the chat. This will go out in the email as well to our homepage. Lots of great events coming up, lots of great resources, stuff that Hallie mentioned, great tools to help you find your path and figure out if you're in the right career for you. And we thank you for being here today. Please do not forget there's a survey. It's going to pop up when the event ends. Please answer the questions, and it really helps us plan for our future events and help figure out how we can help you. Again, Hallie, thanks for being here, and thanks for everyone else for being here as well.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. Good luck.
Bye, guys.